Dark Night of the Soul. What an ego death felt like to me. Hi guys! Today I want to talk to you about my experience going through what a lot of spiritual teachers call it a dark night of the soul. I've heard how so many people's spiritual awakening happens with a big bang and how they change overnight, but mine was a lot more gradual. I love hearing other people's spiritual awakening stories because they're all very unique, but at the same time, similar in so many ways. So I thought you'd also like to hear my personal story of how it was like for me during my dark night of the soul phase, specifically my experience with ego death. Background. Before we get into my dark night of the soul phase, for a little context, let me give you a picture of what kind of person I used to be before all this happened. I was a straight A student, pretty academic, and smart enough to coast right along the top of the class. I was a little shy, but assertive when I had to be, and I had good close friends. I wasn't popular or extremely outgoing, but I would say I was pretty confident in myself. I walked around believing that I was a pretty lovable kid because everyone liked me. I was also a good kid. The type of kid that parents love. That was me. I did what other people expected of me. I obeyed my parents, never rebelled, at least not in a big way. One important thing to know about me is that I was spiritual, even as a kid. An old soul in a kid's body type of deal. And I was always somewhat sensitive to energies, and I felt overwhelmed easily by energies around me. Anyway, up until then, I was a happy kid. I had my awkward side, but, it was all cool. My ego death starts. Then, when I entered college, my spiritual awakening started. I honestly don't know what set it off. But if I had to guess, I think what set it off was being removed from everything that defined who I was. Up until then, my parents were a demanding presence in my life. My parents are very loving, generous, and kind people, but they were pretty overbearing with high standards when I was a kid. But when I came to college, it was the first time in my life I was without my parents' influence. Also, at the same time, my high school boyfriend and I broke up, and my friends and I drifted apart because they were enjoying the college party life, and I just wasn't into that scene. All in all, I became alone. And I think the total break from my previous life set into motion a spiritual awakening. But even that doesn't quite satisfy why I went through an ego death right then. People go to college and do just fine. They adjust to their new life. And I'm not someone who can't handle something like that. I'm a pretty adventurous person who doesn't shy away from taking risks. So why did I go through an ego death at that time? I honestly don't know. Anyway, at the time, I didn't realize I was going through an ego death. Only in retrospect did I realize that what I went through was a total breakdown of my ego. This is how an ego death felt like. Like I said, it started as soon as I came to college, and it was a long, gradual process. When I was going through it, it just felt like some kind of severe depression. And I don't know, maybe the beginning of a spiritual awakening starts with a depression. Anyway, it was not a euphoric, blissful experience. That actually came much later, but right now, we'll focus on what the ego death feels like. When I was going through an ego death, it felt like a complete loss of who I am, loss of the subjective self. It feels like you don't exist, like you're not anchored to this world or even in this reality. It feels like you're no longer the person that you thought you were because that person wasn't real to begin with. In fact, you're not a person at all, but just a pair of eyes looking out. You feel like you're just consciousness that exists, an amorphous substance in a vast void of space. I know, sounds strange, right? I swear I don't do drugs, and I've never done drugs. Whether you believe it or not, all this that was happening was completely natural. Anyway, in that state of total ego breakdown, I didn't know who I was. And I don't mean that in the same way like how people just throw around those words like, oh, I don't know who I am anymore kind of thing. I mean, really, I didn't know who or what I was. The most fundamental idea of what makes up an identity of a person became completely abstract to me. Gender, age, race meant nothing to me. I knew with my rational mind that my body was a female body, and this outside persona was a 20-year-old Asian American. But these facts didn't feel like they were pointing to something real. They all felt abstract, just a concept or an idea, and nothing real. I didn't know what kind of personality I had. Am I a happy person, a quiet person, or what? It felt like I can take on these personalities if I focused on it, but it would be just something that I take on the outside and not really me. Personalities were not the real me. I was completely lost. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I was supposed to look forward to. All the ideas and beliefs I had about myself vanished too easily. We live our lives thinking that who we are is solid, right? But when you go through an ego breakdown, your idea of yourself scatters into thin air, and you realize that your identity was just an idea that you had held on to. Not only did my ideas about myself disappear, but all the beliefs I had in God, the cosmos, my personal truths just went black too. Life was totally and utterly void of meaning. I mean, I remember how I just looked at other people and wondered how they could be so invested in their lives and live their lives as if what they were doing was real. What meaning did they have that completely missed me? What motivated them? Why did they study, make friends, and try to get a career? The only way to describe how I felt as I was going through an ego death is to say that I was in complete darkness and lostness. I felt empty. But not just empty, I felt untethered from this reality, and everything had no meaning. Everything that I saw in the world that other people put so much meaning to had absolutely no meaning to me. Sounds like depression, doesn't it? Well, depression definitely came with this in that I felt no joy. I felt unmotivated and numb. But I've had bouts of depression in my life, so I can say that this ego death was different in that I completely lost the sense of the self, of the subjective self. I became an abstract concept. My identity was wiped clean. This stage, which many spiritual teachers call it the dark night of the soul, actually lasted not one night, but several years for me. I would say close to 10 years. I know, sounds horrible. But I would say that I was in the thick of it the first 5 years, and the latter 5 years, I started slowly rebuilding my identity. And it was somewhat of a conscious effort to rebuild my identity because nothing felt solid to me anymore. Rebuilding my identity. You know, it took me years afterwards to rebuild my identity. Remember, I didn't feel like I existed. I felt like an amorphous substance, just a pair of eyes looking out. So in this way, I preferred nothing, and at the same time, nothing bothered me. But I slowly started rebuilding my identity. This time not based on other people's expectations or societal expectations, but based on something more authentic, something that rang true for my soul. And this rebuilding and rediscovering process was long too. Anyway, we'll talk about that in another video because this video is already getting long. If you enjoyed listening to my experience of going through an ego death, please give the video a like. Clicking like helps to get my tiny channel exposed to other people. Also, I'm curious, Did you ever experience an ego death or something similar to it? As far as the people around me, I'm the only one who went through it. So it'd be great to know someone else who went through it and to know what that felt like for you. Anyway, like always, thanks for watching my video. It means so much that you watched until the end. Makes my heart all warm and tingly. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Regards, Ray.